Hey everyone, it's your girl Naia, back at it again. Today, we're diving into a video that's about to blow our minds gaming on the RTX 5090 with DLSS 4. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear RTX 5090, I am like, is that a graphics card or a spaceship? Either way, I'm ready for some next level visuals, and maybe if you did that just happen in moments. I mean, come on, DLSS 4? Sounds like a secret code for prepare to be amazed, so grab your snacks, settle in, and let's see if this gaming setup is as epic as my last attempt at Mario Kart. Spoiler alert. It was not pretty. If you're excited to see some jaw-dropping graphics and maybe a little chaos along the way, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Let's get into it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment I've been waiting for. I've been itching to try the brand new 5090, and we're here at NVIDIA, and I've actually got some access, and I can test Cyberpunk. And I'll be honest with you,
This is where it gets real. Testing Cyberpunk on the RTX 5090? That's like giving a kid a candy store. I can already feel the excitement building. Cyberpunk is known for its insane graphics, so if this card can handle it, we're in for a treat. Let's see if it lives up to the hype.
I've gone into this being, as if you saw the video at least, very, very pessimistic about it, because if 15 out of 16 pixels with all of the bells and whistles turned on mean that there's barely any like rasterization or rendering going on, what's the GPU actually doing? We want more performance. We don't want to have to rely on all of these features. But what if it just works? And what if all of these features are very much a good thing? That is what we're here to find out. And very importantly, not only do we have a pre-release version of Cyberpunk running here, but we do have our frame rate counter, but crucially, we also have our PC latency, because this was the thing for me that I was very, very scared as to what the performance was going to be, because it's all very well having 220 FPS, but if your latency is sky high, then it's not really usable anyway. So let's go through the settings. Let's start this off by saying at the moment we have this running at 4K. This is actually a 4K 240 Hz display. We go over to video, there you are. So we have this running at 4K. We're not running this in windowed mode or anything.
All right, we're diving into the settings. Running Cyberpunk at 4K without windowed mode? That's bold. It's like saying, I am all in. If this setup can handle it smoothly, we're about to witness some serious eye candy. Let's see how this beast performs.
Mode or anything. We've got DLSS set to performance, but we will change this in just a second. Ray reconstruction is on. We have DLSS turned up to the max, which is the multi-frame generation, so 4x. And then when you scroll down, you can see all of the other settings are pretty much high, or, well, they're maxed out really across the board. That one's not. Let's change that to Psycho. And then in terms of ray tracing, we actually have full path tracing enabled on this. So
Whoa, full path tracing? That's like turning the graphic style to 11. If this doesn't make the game look stunning, I don't know what will. This is where we see if the RTX 5090 can really flex its muscles. Let's see those reflections and lighting effects shine.
Enabled on this. So this is now absolute maximum. And honestly, I am like lost for words about how smooth this is.
Lost for words? That's a big deal. If it's that smooth, we're definitely looking at some next level gaming here. Smooth gameplay can make or break the experience. Especially in a visually rich game like Cyberpunk, I can't wait to see how it looks in action.
This is not going to come across properly in video. And again, this is coming from someone that's been very, very pessimistic about this. But this is 240 Hz, 4K, and we're getting 290 FPS. And yes, that is AI generated, but our latency is around about 35 to 40 milliseconds. So this feels pretty spectacular. I mean, is this perfect? Well, no, you are going to find a couple of artifacts from here and there, but I mean, it's just not very obvious. One thing I have noticed on a couple of these PCs has been like a little bit of stutter every now and then. A
little stutter? That's a bummer, especially with such high specs. It's like having a sports car that occasionally stalls at the stoplight. But hey, if it's just a bug in the pre-release version, that's a relief. Let's hope they iron that out before the final release.
One of the PCs was restarted. I was told that was not absolutely right, but I've noticed it a little bit here, but definitely not as much. As I say, early access build, this when it's released, we don't actually know when it's going to be released yet. It could be along with the GPUs on the 30th of January, or it could be a little bit later. They haven't actually told me yet. I'm not sure if they know, to be honest with you. But what I want to do here is not just say, oh wow, 300 FPS or 291. I want to go through all the different options and all of the different settings so you can actually see what this GPU is capable of in Cyberpunk at a whole host of different settings. So let's start by lowering this down. Again, frankly, ludicrous 284 FPS. This is
Ludicrous 284 FPS, so that's insane. It's like the GPU is flexing its muscles and saying, "Is that all you got?" If it can maintain that kind of performance while lowering settings, we're definitely looking at a powerhouse here. Let's see how it holds up with different configurations.
This is not like any bells and whistles. What's the word, Carl, I'm looking for? It's not no mucking about, no lies here. But yes, we will now change the DLSS to quality. So usually you would notice a massive difference to the frame rate and the game will feel significantly worse. So turning this down to quality, once it settles, you can...
All right, we're switching to quality DLSS. If it can still hold around 203 FPS, that's impressive. It's like getting the best of both worlds, great visuals and solid performance. Let's see how this impacts the overall experience.
You can see that our latency, as you'd expect, has increased. So we're now looking around about 50 milliseconds or so. We did see a little frame spike there. My quick cheat sheet in terms of PC latency is that you're looking for 55 milliseconds or lower. For me personally, in a single player game, that is the point where I can start to notice that you're almost steering your character a little bit. Obviously 56 milliseconds, you're probably not going to notice the difference, but the closer you get to 100 milliseconds or so, the more obvious that's going to be. So we're aiming for anything below 55 milliseconds or so. And DLSS has also been improved quite a lot this time around. The, again, almost cheat sheet that they said was you're looking at 4K resolution. If you use DLSS Performance, that's now going to be similar or reminiscent to what DLSS Balanced was on the older version of this. So we now have DLSS Transformers, which will help to just reduce some of those jaggies, a little bit of like ghosting or any like horrible bits of motion or something in the game. I always get a little bit misled in Cyberpunk because they deliberately add a bit of like motion blur to the text, but no, that's just the game. That's nothing to do with DLSS. But yes, quality settings, 50 milliseconds or so. So I would argue that this is probably going to be the sweet spot really for 240 FPS monitors or so. But I mean, realistically, who actually has a 4K 240 hertz display? There's not really been a reason for everyone to go out and get the one, because even if you had a 4090, you wouldn't be able to fill it out. But suddenly, a single player game like this with full ray tracing, you're able to do that. So
now we're talking full ray tracing in a single player game at that level. That's a game changer. It's like stepping into a whole new world where every detail pops. If this GPU can handle that, it's definitely worth the hype. Let's see how it performs in action.
Do that. So that is pretty ridiculous. But let's now proceed to actually pull apart this DLSS frame generation a little bit by finding our multi-frame generation setting. We're getting a little bit of flicker at the moment, I think.
A little flicker? That's not ideal, especially when you're trying to showcase the power of DLSS. It's like a tease showing off what could be amazing but not quite hitting the mark. Let's see if adjusting the settings can smooth that out.
I think, again, pre-release build. But we've changed this down to 3x, which means we now have 2 AI-generated frames rather than 3. And you can see that our frame rate, as you'd expect, has decreased. Interestingly, the latency, it's improved ever so slightly, but
Improved latency? That's a nice surprise. It's interesting how tweaking the frame generation can lead to better responsiveness. If they can balance that with solid frame rates, we might be looking at a winning combo for gamers. Let's see how this plays out.
But I thought we'd have like a bigger difference, and this is a good thing. I thought that the more AI-generated frames that you actually put in here, obviously the higher the latency would be. And that is true, but it's not as dramatic as I would have expected. It's only around about 3, 4, maybe 5 milliseconds or so. Probably not even that, to be honest. It's going to depend on the game, the implementation, the settings and things. But I find that very, very intriguing and very impressive. But if we actually have a look at our frame rate counter now, you can see, again, 4K, DLSS Super Resolution set to quality, and now we have our 3X. We're looking at around about 46 milliseconds and about 160 FPS. So
160 FPS and 46 milliseconds? That's still pretty solid. It's impressive how the settings can be adjusted while maintaining decent performance. If this is the sweet spot for quality and responsiveness, gamers are definitely going to appreciate it.
yeah, so still really, really responsive. And if you compare this to 30 series and 40 series, obviously it's a massive jump.
A massive jump? That's what we love to hear. Seeing those numbers side by side really puts it into perspective. If the RTX 5090 is delivering that kind of performance boost, it's definitely a game changer for serious gamers. Let's see how it stacks up in real gameplay.
Massive jump. And one of the other big dramatic things that I think is going to help a lot of gamers, and it's something I've had a lot of issues with when it's come to frame generation, is actually the frame pacing. And they've actually managed to get the frame pacing to be a lot more consistent. That's the word I'm looking for, by using something called, what was it called, Carl? Was it flip? Carl didn't know either. I had to ask someone. Flip metering. So
Flip metering, that sounds intriguing. If it's helping with frame pacing, that could really enhance the gaming experience. Consistency is key, especially in fast-paced games like Cyberpunk. Let's see how this plays out in real scenarios.
So essentially, this is just going to help to iron out and actually present the frames to your display in a much more consistent manner. So you're not going to have, it's not necessarily stutter, it's just weird kind of frame pacing that you could find in certain games, certain scenarios, and interestingly, certain displays, because in Dragon Age, I had that issue on my TV, but not on the monitors, which was weird, where the frames just weren't quite being delivered consistently. But that is something that has been hopefully fixed. But let's go one step further. We go back into our video, and now we'll turn this down to 2x.
Dropping it down to 2x, that's going to be interesting. With just one AI-generated frame, we should see how it impacts both performance and latency. If it can still maintain a solid frame rate while improving responsiveness, that's a win for gamers. Let's check it out.
And again, I don't think you're really going to notice that much difference, to be honest with you. Our latency, once it's settled, is around about 42, 47 milliseconds. And actually, I want to quickly just go back into this, and we'll now change it back to 4x, just so we can see the difference. Has that added much latency at all? Again, once it's settled, you can see there, no, not really. That's added maybe, what's that? 2 milliseconds, again, frame spike there. But yeah, you can really see that actually, once you've enabled frame gen, changing the setting on the multi-frame generation doesn't actually make too much difference. So
that's a solid takeaway. If changing the multi-frame generation settings doesn't impact performance significantly, it gives gamers more flexibility without sacrificing responsiveness. It's all about finding that sweet spot for the best experience.
Much different. So I think for a lot of people, you're probably going to want to turn this up as high as possible, really. But NVIDIA have been clear, there's not really any reason to have this way above your monitor's refresh rate. In an ideal world, you'd actually have a frame rate that was maybe slightly below the maximum of your display, and then you've got adaptive sync to kind of handle the rest, really. So it's nice and smooth, nice and consistent, and in theory, you're introducing less artifacts from this. You know, real talk, this is serious. This is something that gamers are going to either want to buy or avoid, and
this is the moment of truth. If gamers are deciding whether to invest based on this tech, it better deliver. The stakes are high, and with all these features, it sounds like NVIDIA is really pushing the envelope. Let's see if it's worth the hype.
And they're obviously looking for channels like this to actually give them some honest information about whether these things are any good, any problems and things. And I take that very seriously because this is a lot of cash, especially if you're looking at 5080, 5090. And this is just one game. Obviously, we'll be doing our full benchmarking, full testing, and we will give our full review. But I'm very, very impressed so far. I don't know how this is going to scale down the stack because, again, frame generation works best when you've got a high frame rate to start with. But that latency figure for me, that is the thing that really makes the difference.
That latency figure is crucial. If it can stay low while delivering high frame rates, that's a game changer for competitive gaming. It's all about that smooth experience, and if this tech can provide it, gamers are going to be all in.
Really makes the difference because I've not really been able to play Cyberpunk with all of the bells and whistles and have the combination of a high frame rate and low latency. But let's now expose all of the weaknesses in this and do what NVIDIA don't want us to do and actually turn DLSS frame gen off entirely. I realise actually we're going to have to jump cut this and there'll be people going, no, he's changing the settings around, it's a different build. No, you just have to restart the game with frame gen in Cyberpunk now. Not entirely sure why, I think it's just because it makes sure it works properly. But yes, no cheating here, I promise. Let's see what this is like without any frame gen.
All right, this is the moment of truth. Testing without frame generation will really show us the raw power of the RTX 5090. If it can still deliver a solid experience without those enhancements, that's a strong indicator of its capabilities. Let's see how it holds up.
Spoiler alert, it's probably not going to be as good. Right, okay then, here we go. Get some guesses in now. I promise I haven't looked. I'm saying probably about 78 FPS. Oh, not that far off, around about 68. So this is now very reminiscent of what I kind of remember Cyberpunk with path tracing to be. So obviously frame gen is off now. We do have our DLSS set to quality. So this is not the way I would advise playing this game. You can if you want. Obviously the settings are turn on, turn off. You can.
So we're sitting at around 65 FPS. That's definitely a drop from the frame generation. It shows just how much that tech boosts performance. If you want the best experience in Cyberpunk, it looks like frame general is the way to go.
On, turn off. You can see that our latency is actually among the lowest that we've seen. And you might be a little bit confused why if you're kind of new to PC gaming and DLSS. how can we get a lower, which is obviously better, latency when our frame rate is lower? Remember, as soon as you actually add the AI frame generation into the mix, because there's more work to do, it essentially adds a little bit of a latency penalty. And despite the fact we've got high frame rate, the game won't feel more responsive because we're not rendering more frames. So this is why we've got slightly better latency than we had a second ago. But
That makes sense. It's fascinating how latency can improve even with a lower frame rate. When you take away the extra processing from frame generation, it really highlights the balance between performance and responsiveness in gaming. This is some valuable insight for gamers looking to optimize their experience.
Second ago, but I guess actually this is the figure I really wanted to see, because we typically saw maybe, like, obviously it depends on the frame rate, but 10 to 15 milliseconds of latency added on the older cards, whereas on this one, in this particular instance, we're getting about 10 to 13. So they have tightened it up by the looks of things. It's got a new algorithm for frame gen, so you're going to get better image quality and better latency, but it still follows the same rule, right? If you turn on frame generation and you've got a low frame rate in the first place, it's not going to save you. But
That's a crucial point. If the base frame rate is low, frame generation won't magically fix the experience. It's all about starting strong to really benefit from those enhancements. This is key info for anyone looking to optimize their gaming setup.
But if you've got like a base of around about 60 FPS like we have here, then you're still able to obviously have a game that feels decently responsive. I mean, 40 milliseconds, as I say, that's well within what we need for a single player game, but it's pretty night and day difference. Obviously, it's not what NVIDIA don't want us to see, but it's not obviously what they're showing us, because I am aware that there will be loads of people watching this, again, myself included. I'm very much a pessimist, saying that this is real, this is what we should be looking at. I mean, this is still with DLSS. I mean, if we turn DLSS off entirely, there you are, DLSS off. So
Turning DLSS off entirely, that's a bold move. It'll be interesting to see how the game performs without any of those enhancements. If the experience holds up, that'll really showcase the raw power of the RTX 5090. Let's see what happens.
So this is literally just raw rendering. You can see that the frame rate obviously goes through the roof. We're getting 28 FPS and latency of around about 60 to 70 or so. And actually, Editor Carl, if you kind of move out a second, this is going to be a great example. If you have like a low frame rate and then you turn frame generation on, and you find that your latency kind of goes up above, as I say, about 55, but particularly like 70, 80 milliseconds,
If latency is hitting 70 to 80 milliseconds, that's definitely a concern. It shows how crucial it is to have a solid base frame rate before enabling frame generation. If it starts affecting gameplay responsiveness, that could be a deal breaker for many gamers. Let's see how this unfolds.
Milliseconds. What you can kind of feel with your mouse is almost the equivalent of what you're seeing here. So if you ever have like a weird mismatch between the game looking great but feeling a little bit weird, that will be because the latency isn't what it should be. I mean, that's actually a really nice analogy, actually. That's what the game can feel like if your latency is too high. But yes, this is with path tracing though, but 34 FPS. It's not a lot, is it? Hang on a minute. I realize we didn't test with ray tracing off, and I've also managed to break it in a good way for me.
All right, testing without ray tracing is a smart move. It'll be interesting to see how much that impacts performance. If it can significantly boost the FPS, that's valuable info for gamers who want a smoother experience without sacrificing too much visual fidelity. Let's see what happens.
Not in a good way for image quality. I mean, if you have a look here, because this is what a lot of people are going to be asking about. Is frame gen going to ruin the look of your game? And in my experience from testing today, most of the time the answer has been no, but you will see that in extreme circumstances, and I think it's fair to say that this is quite extreme, you can definitely see that there is a little bit of haloing. So we've got this set to 2x at the moment, but let's now go and turn this to 4x. I mean, actually, I just rolled a B-roll that we took a second ago. You'll see.
Switching to 4x DLSS, that's where we really see how it handles the visuals. If it can maintain quality while boosting performance, that's a win. Let's see how this looks in action.
You'll see that there definitely is a fair bit of artifacting, but the fact that you really do have to go and look for it is pretty telling, really, that actually I think this tech is going to be very, very usable by the vast majority of people. It's pretty much going to be when you have like really fast motion or things like the hair on screen. That's when the combination of frame gen, DLSS, really pushing AI to generate as many frames as possible, it is going to cause you some artifacts. But now let's turn ray tracing off entirely. Remember that at the moment this is set to the highest possible, which
Turning off ray tracing entirely is a big move. This will really show how the game performs without those advanced lighting effects. If it can still deliver a great experience, that's a solid option for players who prioritize performance over visuals. Let's see how it goes.
which is path tracing. I think because this is like a, as I say, like an exclusive build, it seems as if you can't actually have any of the other ray tracing settings, but I imagine, well, almost certainly that's going to not be in the final version. You'll have all of the RT options when you actually get to play this. Again, not entirely sure when that's going to be, but let's turn ray tracing off. Hopefully this has not bricked the system. I think they'd get sad. No, there we are. It has flicked into life, and you can notice a massive difference to the image quality. But
A massive difference in image quality, that's what we want to see. Turning off ray tracing can really change the visuals, and if it boosts performance significantly, that's a great option for players. Let's see how it holds up in gameplay.
but obviously the frame rate now does go even higher. We're getting 436 FPS in Cyberpunk. That is pretty ridiculous. Yes, we are using AI, but if you don't want to have ray tracing on, then yeah, you're going to get an even higher frame rate. But who needs, at 4K performance, 433 FPS? Anyway, back to earlier, Marcus. Right, no, hang on. One more thing, actually. I want to do an acoustic test, and I'm now filming this like an hour and a half later, because
An acoustic test, that's a unique angle. It'll be interesting to see how the system performs in terms of noise levels during intense gaming. If it can keep things quiet while delivering high performance, that's a big plus for gamers who value a peaceful setup.
later, because everyone else has gone in the room, which is nice, so we've got a nice quiet room. I will say that there's a weird air conditioner or something in this room that's making some whine, so this is your baseline. So you hear that whine, that is not coming from the PC, I promise. This is what the graphics card sounds like with everything turned up to max. So tensor cores, RT, and obviously the GPU itself is just going nuts. And it's using about 575 watts, I think. Very quiet.
Very quiet? That's impressive for a high-performance setup. If the GPU can deliver top-tier performance without being noisy, that's a huge win for gamers who want a peaceful environment. It sounds like this build is really well optimized.
That's a longer noise test than I would normally do. Pretty nuts for the amount of power and the fact that that is a 2-slot card. That is ridiculous. Anyway, back to wherever I was. But actually, guys, I think the last test that I do want to do is to use DLSS Super Resolution, but I want to set this to performance, but then not use any frame gen, because I know for a fact there will be people out there that won't want to have any frame gen enabled ever under any circumstances. So this is going to be the best combination, really.
This combination sounds promising. Using DLSS at performance without frame generation could strike a great balance between visuals and responsiveness. If it can deliver a smooth experience while maintaining quality, it's definitely a solid option for gamers who prefer that setup. Let's see how it performs.
And really, if you're after like the lowest latency possible, and indeed our latency is, what's that, 26 milliseconds at the moment. Our frame rate is around about 90. So I definitely can notice that this now feels the best, but is it the overall best when it comes to the overall experience, the overall image quality and responsiveness combined? I mean, especially on a monitor like this, I would definitely start with frame generation on, and then if you found that you were running into any issues or you did want that lower latency, maybe.
That's a smart approach. Starting with frame generation on to maximize performance and then adjusting for latency if needed is a solid strategy. It allows players to experience the best visuals first and then fine-tune based on their preferences. Let's see how this plays out in practice.
Latency, maybe you were specifically just in firefights and things all the time, then yeah, you could play like this. But I mean, clearly the big draw with this generation is going to be the new frame gen and the multi-frame generation. And I don't want to say I'm sold on this because it's just one game, but yeah, very impressed. 1 out of 100% of the time. But what will it perform like in the games that don't have any of these NVIDIA features? Is it going to be worth it for those? We're not entirely sure. The gains definitely are not going to be crazy. I mean, we're probably looking like 15 to 30% depending.
A 15 to 30 performance drop without those NVIDIA features. That's a significant consideration for gamers. It really highlights the value of those enhancements. If the card can still hold its own in non-NVIDIA games, that would be a strong selling point. Let's see how it performs across the board.
Depending on the game, but if there is something that does have the RTX features, and you're obviously looking at the higher end cards, the 5080, the 5090 that have loads of VRAM, I think it's looking pretty good so far. But let us know your thoughts on what you've seen here today. Do you think that all of the quality settings are good? What combination would you go for? Do you think frame gen is going to be worth turning on? It's a massive difference. Or would you still want to play with the lowest latency possible with frame gen off? Or do you think all of it's a waste of time? Let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below.
Engaging the audience for their thoughts is a great way to wrap up. It encourages interaction and builds a community around the content. Plus, it's always interesting to hear different perspectives on performance settings and preferences. Let's see what the viewers think.
Section below. Smash the like button if you've enjoyed this though, and as I say, get subscribed for a full review. Let us know what games you want us to test. But thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.
And there you have it, fam. We just took a wild ride through gaming on the RTX 5090 with DLSS 4. And let's be real, it was wild like a roller coaster at full speed. I came in expecting mind-blowing visuals and a gaming experience that leave me breathless. And guess what? I wasn't disappointed mostly. Sure, we had a couple of hiccups with stutters and flickers that felt like they were just teasing us with what could be an unreal gaming landscape. I mean, come on. I want my gaming experience to be smoother than my last pickup line. But when that ludicrous 284 FPS hit, it was like watching the Flash run a marathon, absolutely insane. In the end, if you're serious about your gaming setup and want that insane power boost, the RTX 5090 is shaping up to be a must-have. Just be ready for a few quirks, kind of like a new puppy that's still learning how to go outside without leaving surprises everywhere. So what do you all think? Is the RTX 5090 worth the hype, or is it all just smoke and mirrors? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed our little tech adventure today. Join the Naia fam for more hilariously honest reactions, and let's keep this train rolling. Until next time, keep gaming, stay cute, and let's face it, who needs a spaceship when you have the RTX 5090?